Hello, everyone, and welcome to America's Conservative Podcast. See, I surprised you with that, didn't I? Decided to start saying it today. It'll officially be the title of the show when I come back from my vacation, going up to see my parents. I'm leaving Wednesday, and I'll be back August 11th. I will not be doing any shows while I'm up there. Not going to take any of my equipment with me. I'm going to devote all my time to my parents, and I don't want to devote any time to preparing for the show, although I will be working on a few other things while I'm up there. I won't have to worry about preparing for this show and recording it and uploading it and everything else, which will be a little bit, I guess, of a vacation for me from the show. But I will be back probably on August 12th, because August 11th I get in late in the day, like 5 o'clock or something like that. So there's that. Oh, by the way, this is Ed Densel. You know who I am. You know my voice by now. But I told you that I was going to be changing the title of the show, and I've sent a new logo to Red State Talk Radio. I don't know if they've changed that yet or not. I've not been on the website recently. So there are going to be some changes going on that you will see when I come back. And I'm really looking forward to it. Came up with a really nice idea this past weekend for the show when I come back, but I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to jinx it yet, but I think it's a good idea. I think that it will go in line with kind of who I am on this show, and me not being friends with politicians or anybody on the inside, and that is on purpose. And I want the new show with the new title to reflect that. And so I think that there's some content that I can add to the show that really shows how much I want to stay away from that stuff. So we'll see. We'll see how it's going to go. It's going to be interesting. Can't wait. There's something else that you should be looking for. You know, at the end of these shows, I always do my little marketing pitch. I always tell you, I might as well do it right now. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can go to edwarddensel.com. You can find all of these old shows on edwarddensel.com. You can also find them at Podomatic and in the iTunes Store and Stitcher. I'm not going to be uploading to SoundCloud and Podbean anymore. I'm just not getting enough traffic at those sites to really, really explain why I'm continuing to take part there. Don't get a lot of support there, and that's fine. So that'll cut down a little preparation for the show, a little bit of post-show work that I have to do. So you can only find the show at Podomatic, Stitcher, and iTunes. And, of course, when it plays, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern on Red State Talk Radio. And I'll continue to upload to my site, edwarddensel.com, as well. But you can find my books on Amazon.com. Just do a search for me there. Starting a new show, Unfound, which will also start when I get back from these 2 weeks, which I'm looking forward to that. But something new where you should be looking for me. And as you know, when I do anything on the internet, I don't use a pseudonym. I use my real name. I figure I'm man enough to stand up for my own values, unlike most people get on there. Is it me, or is it that adults using fake names and pseudonyms to comment everything? I mean, how childish is that, really? It is kind of weird. When you really think about it, it's really weird. And maybe it's just a showing that how infantile adults continue to be in the 21st century. Could be. But I'm going to be doing some writing for thenewamericana.com. That's a website that I've mentioned before, that I started to go. I haven't been to Breitbart.com nor the Drudge Report in months. I would say since, July? Maybe beginning of April, end of March maybe. That's the last time my eyes went to either of those sites. So I've started going to some other ones, and one of the new ones is the New Americana. Well, they were looking for some writers, do some commentary, and I emailed them, and I think that we're going to be able to work something out there. So look for me there. It'll be another place that I'll be able to express my ideas in written form, so you get to see a little bit of political writing form by me, which will be new. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'm going to have all sorts of places where I'm going to be, some new things going on come the end of August. Although I do anticipate me starting to write for the newamericana.com probably within the next week. I may be able to crank something out while I am up there with my parents. We'll just have to see. So you'll be able to find Ed Dentzel in a whole host of places, along with the new show when I come back, America's Conservative Podcast, ACP. Didn't even know that was going to be that. ACP, 45 ACP, well-known caliber of American pistols. Just happened to be that way. It's funny how those things work out. So there you go. Let's get to the politics of the show, or the issues of the show, I should say. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. This is one of those, I've talked about her before. She hasn't been a topic of conversation, at least on this show, for a while. I can't even remember the last time I talked about her, but when I have mentioned her, I remember what I've said, even though I don't remember when I said it, is that we are lucky as non-Democrats that they have had her as their leader, I guess, since 2011. We're very fortunate. She's not a likable person. I don't know if the Democrats could ever put somebody who is likable. Howard Dean, remember, if you go back, you have to remember that Howard Dean once held Debbie Wasserman Schultz's position as the head of the Democrat National Committee. But every time she was on TV, she managed to put her foot in her mouth, and the rest of the Democrats never did anything about it. In fact, it seemed like they continued to embrace her. The only person, it seems, who really didn't like Debbie Wasserman Schultz that much was Barack Obama, if that's to be believed. And then when we say Barack Obama, that of course then means Mrs. Obama and Valerie Jarrett and all of those cultists within Barack Obama's circle. But outside of it, you never heard really too much complaining about her. Now, you should know, the word is that she was a prodigious money raiser. Really knew how to get into a room and talk to donors and about giving more money. And you should know she is from Florida. She's a representative from here in Florida. So she raised money, but when it came to that representing Democrats and getting on whatever show it was, I know that I always said, they choose a person like this to head their party, and we can't beat them. Now, granted, I know that during Barack Obama's presidency that a lot more states have gone Republican as far as governors go, legislatures. I know that even though I'm not a part of the Republican Party anymore, I'd like to remind you of that. Over the last 7-8 years, that the Republicans have also raised a lot of money. And that's what makes it so weird about, I guess, Donald Trump becoming the nominee, is that the truth is, at least getting votes, except for in presidential elections, the Republican Party has done pretty well, just as far as getting into office. Now, some would say the bad part about this is that not enough Republicans have done enough Republican things over that time, whether you want to start that in 2010 when they took back the House or in 2014 when they took back the Senate, to do much. And in fact, going along with the Democrats too much. I have not necessarily seen it that way. And as much talk as there have been about kicking everybody out of Washington and sending Donald Trump in there to crackheads, these same people are then going out in the primaries and voting for the same Republicans in both the House and the Senate. So it's very confusing to me. So, given all that, you would have thought, being that the Republicans at least raising money and getting into certain offices at the federal and state level, you think that would have been enough to can Debbie Wasserman Schultz at least a couple years ago, and it hasn't. It wasn't. Instead, what finally got her kicked out, which, you know what's weird to me about this WikiLeaks thing? Didn't we kind of know this anyway? In fact, I think the reason that I talked about Debbie Wasserman Schultz the last time, but this would be months and months ago, is because of what was going on the Democrat side with the superdelegates and Debbie Wasserman Schultz showing a leaning toward Hillary Clinton and all of that. So, being that we've known kind of that Debbie Wasserman Schultz favored Hillary Clinton for all of this time, or is this WikiLeaks stuff really that? It's not a surprise. It's not like you're having your 50th birthday party and you think that you're just going to be having this quiet evening with your wife, husband, or whoever else, and then you come home and there's 50 people in the backyard screaming, surprise! It's certainly not like that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was working against Bernie Sanders, is it? It's not to me, and I have no special connections within the Democrat Party. I don't have any special connections actually anywhere. The only connection I have is to the internet where I read all this stuff. So maybe it's just because of the blatantness of it, because she's so over the top, I guess, if this is to be believed, these emails about saying, well, we should use, it almost is like opponent research against Bernie Sanders. And religion is an issue, being that Bernie Sanders is an atheist. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz thought that, well, we should use that, Hillary should use that against them. And where was it? Kentucky and West Virginia. And then making the point that he really isn't a Democrat. He's an independent. He's just caucused with the Democrats over the years, but technically he's not part of the Democrat Party. Should use that against him. So in that, you could say she almost sounds like a Republican, I guess, in coming up with those ideas. You know what I think of when I hear this? I wish that Rance Priebus would have been like this. And we're going to get to Rance Priebus, I think, before this show's over. You wish he would have been like this. You wish that Rance Priebus's attitude toward Donald Trump would have been exactly like Debbie Wasserman Schultz's attitude toward Bernie Sanders. Because you have to remember something. Even though I know that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is not a likable person. I don't believe she's that smart. Obviously, she's not anywhere close to conservative or anything like that. But the reason she was doing all of this is because she wants to win, even though I know that the party itself has been losing except for presidential elections. And she's close with Hillary Clinton. But no matter what Bernie supporters might say, I tend to believe that given a national election between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton would win pretty easily. And I think that's probably what was going through Debbie Wasserman Schultz's mind. In fact, she was trying to get Bernie Sanders out of the race to make it easier for Hillary Clinton to win the nomination. And so all these people are now aghast at her trying to do this. I think back to 2012 when it was kind of the same thing, when all of those Romney supporters were saying, well, Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum and all these, Rick Perry, they need to drop out so it can be easy for Mitt Romney to win the nomination. You just make him go through all these battles that we know he's going to win anyway. Can't these people just give up? So how was what Debbie Wasserman Schultz was, what she was doing, any different than what Republicans did in 2012 and their attitude in 2012? And once again, I say it here in 2016, I wish Reince Priebus disliked Donald Trump as much as Debbie Wasserman Schultz seemed to dislike Bernie Sanders. I wish. We can only wish that now, can't we? No matter what else I might think about Hillary Clinton, the truth is that them avoiding Bernie Sanders becoming the Democrat nominee is the best thing that's happened to the Democrat Party since Barack Obama won in 2012. That's the truth. So there's that. And I know that there are a lot of people right now, and we see them out there. I'll get to Bernie Sanders here in a second and what he's planning to do. But as I've told you, Hillary Clinton is going to find a way to wrap those people up. They haven't even had their convention yet. I mean, she hasn't even gotten up there and spoken yet. And I know there's going to be shenanigans that go on at their convention as well this week. Is it this week? I think it's this week. So we can't get too excited about all this and too frustrated by all this, however you may look at it. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz now resigning. Let's just get right to it. Resigning. It's weird timing because to me, none of this news is new. Now, she may be doing it to take focus off of her because she has to get up there and speak, and so she's resigning so she can make a lower key appearance in Philadelphia, or maybe she'll just, I guess she's supposed to do something right there at the beginning, and maybe she'll leave town. I don't know. But here's what I know. She's resigning probably because she thinks that is the best way for Democrats to win in November. And she's kind of taking one for the team, although I now hear that she's getting hired by Hillary Clinton's campaign, which, in my opinion, is a smart move on Hillary's part. I just wish that there were people on the Republican side who were willing to fall on their sword like Debbie Wasserman Schultz has. As much as I make fun of her and don't like her and everything else, Marco Rubio should have fallen on his sword way back in about February. And a lot of these other Republicans who had no chance after the first or second primary obviously had no chance, and they continued on. Instead, Debbie Wasserman Schultz sees that she, now that this is all out there in the open with these emails and WikiLeaks, she falls on her sword to take herself out of the conversation. Now, Bernie's going to try to keep her in the conversation, but she's trying to take herself out of the equation instead of trying to hold on to that position just because she wants the power. And I do give her some respect for that. Once again, I wish that there would have been some Republican nominees who would have done the same thing. People who weren't winning any states. So we, as the non-Democrats, can make fun of Debbie Wasserman Schultz all we want for what she's done over the last 5 years. But when it comes to winning, and her principles of being just a political hack and wanting Democrats to win, she's willing to fall on her sword. So I give her credit for that. And making sure that her principles win and keep making it as much as possible that the Democrats defeat Donald Trump in November. And this is what I think she probably figured she had to do. Whereas we had a Democrat win on the Republican side, and nobody, until it was too late, was willing to fall on their sword. They could have given maybe Ted Cruz a chance of winning. So it's so difficult to wade through all of this. Now, you can look at it from the other side. Right now, the Democrats, and I think this is why you're seeing this little bounce for Donald Trump right now, is that the Democrats do look like they're in disarray. And as I sent an email to a friend of mine this morning, never underestimate the other side to make mistakes too. Remember, there are a bunch of humans over there as well. They're not perfect. They're not drones. They're not robots. They don't know the future. This is what has made it so frustrating for me as a conservative over the years, because I see liberals making all these mistakes, and we've never been able to take advantage of them. And this is going to, I think, be another instance of that, where Democrats make these huge blunders and conservatives and Republicans can't take advantage because they're too busy making their own blunders with Donald Trump and others. So right now, this is being that the convention's over for the GOP, that it looks good for Donald Trump, and now all this news about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, it's going to help him out for a little bit. My instincts tell me Democrats will figure this all out, because they usually do. They figured it out in 2008. They're going to figure it out with the deep divisions between the Obama camp and Hillary's camp at the time. They'll figure it out now. Now, moving on to that, I tried to tell Hillary Clinton, you should just make Bernie Sanders your vice presidential running mate. I tried to tell her. Instead, she picked Tim Kaine, who, little reading that I've done about him, not as moderate as he's been made out to be. It's funny to me that all of these lefties in the Democrat Party are so outraged by him. I bet if you stopped any of these people on the street and you were to ask them, give me 3 of Tim Kaine's issues that you don't agree with, I bet they couldn't name 3, but they're outraged. You know why they're outraged? They're just outraged because Bernie Sanders didn't get the pick. That's why. It has nothing necessarily to do with Tim Kaine, even though the media, even the conservative media, is going to portray it that way. You have to remember that. I happen to think that this will all go away fairly quickly once it's convention time for them now. They're in the spotlight. We're going to see all, it's no different than somebody going on under a bright light. You're going to see all the pimples and wrinkles and everything else, and even a beautiful person's face. Nobody's perfect. But then at some point, the light will go away, and the person will be absolutely perfect again. And they'll be beautiful again. You'll forget all about those things. And that's what's going to happen on the Democrat side, because that's what they've been doing for decades. Whereas I think on the Republican side, I think, as I've told you, I think that there's going to be a lot of never Trump people who eventually do vote for Donald Trump. And I don't know what you can do about that. I'm not going to. But a lot will coalesce around him as we get closer and closer. My perception, though, is that Republicans are less likely to do something like that than Democrats are. And this is why I say, no matter what 538 blog and others may say, that Hillary still has the easiest best chance of winning in November. But once again, I'm going to say it. Bernie Sanders should have been Hillary Clinton's running mate. Maybe to a lesser extent, I could say Elizabeth Warren maybe would have sufficed as well to make some of those lefties happy. But don't think, just because you see all these lefties, these hardcore Bernie supporters outraged, these people are not, how do I put this? They are not politically astute. They're just mad. Just like Donald Trump's people. They're just mad. They're not political experts. They don't follow the news or anything. You know they follow? They follow a person. Draw any analogy outside of politics that you want to, whether you follow a band, whether you follow an actor or actress, and you go see all his or her movies. You don't know what all these other actors and actresses do, but if this guy or this girl is in a movie, you're going to see it. And then when somebody asks you on the street, what do you think about this other actor getting that part? You're going outraged. You don't even know who this other actor or actress is. It's the same thing. These people are just Bernie Sanders supporters who wish he would have got the vice presidential nomination. And they're outraged at Tim Kaine, not because any of his political ideas, just because his name's not Bernie Sanders. That's why they're ticked. So don't get too excited about this, conservatives, that there's all this disarray on the Democrat side. But once again, on the other end, you never underestimate the other side to make a bunch of mistakes as well. Now, I've read that Bernie Sanders is going to go to the convention and try to block Tim Kaine's nomination. I think that that's probably going to go about as well as those Never Trump people showing up in Cleveland and trying to block Donald Trump's nomination. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think that it's gotten to a point. Is Bernie Sanders outraged? Who knows? It's funny for a guy who 6 months ago nobody gave any chance to, 7, 8, maybe longer than that ago, gave no chance to. Now he's leading a group onto the floor of their convention to block Hillary's vice presidential nomination. You've come a long way, Bernie. And it's funny how even a guy like him who talks about Washington power and everything else, it seems like he likes the power too. He can't be just happy enough just to be there. He's going to go the whole way. Probably because he has a bunch of yes women and yes men and yes transvestites around him. You know. And we're saying, Bernie, we put all this work in this and all this time into this and money. You just can't let her do that. And the only reason they're doing it is because they're hoping they would get a position that Bernie Sanders might get within the administration if Hillary were to do that. That's the only reason. And this reminds me of an article that I was reading. I forget where it was, unfortunately, within maybe the last 3 or 4 days. And there was the saying about being in the room. That too many people want to be in the room with those powerful people. They want to be let in on the back, behind the door secrets and everything else. And they'll do anything to do that. To be so close to power, if not have the power themselves. And these Bernie Sanders people, they feel like they are in the room with Bernie Sanders. And so they want to make sure that he continues to be in the room as well. So they can be in the room. If he's not in there close to power, then they aren't. I think that I've talked about this before in my experiences years ago when I'd run into a famous person once in a while and they'd have like a handler, a press secretary, an assistant or something like that. That assistant, whoever she or he was, would say anything, do anything to protect what that famous person was doing, whether they were late or whatever else. Do it. That was their job. And it didn't matter how much the job made this assistant look like a fool, the person was going to continue to do it. Because they wanted to continue to have that position and wanted to continue to be able to go to that famous person's house and be able to go back to a 25th school year reunion and say, hey, yeah, I'm an assistant to this person. How about that? That's why this all goes on. That's why it all goes on. In the same way with Bernie supporters and then pushing him to do this. So I'm going to continue to talk about this after the break. You've been listening to America's Conservative Podcast.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we are back at America's Conservative Podcast. I want to continue to talk about Bernie Sanders and what's going on the Democrat side. I think the point that I was trying to make before the break, and it's funny, I have in my notes, I have Bernie for the block. It reminds me of Hollywood Squares. Remember that show? Is it still on? I don't even know, in reruns or something. Hollywood Squares, where they get Whoopi Goldberg, of course, even going way back to like the Paul Lynde days, showing my age there. Bernie Sanders, could you imagine him playing Hollywood Squares? And then I'm going to pick Bernie for the block. And so Bernie's out there. He's going to try to block Tim Kaine's nomination. And here's what I know. I'm going to say that Bernie Sanders has nothing against Tim Kaine. I'm going to guess that Bernie Sanders thinks Tim Kaine is perfectly fine as a vice presidential pick. And it's to me, it kind of feels I always like this, put it this way. I knew that it seemed Debbie Wasserman Schultz and others were working against Bernie Sanders in the nomination process, right? So how is it now that Bernie Sanders seems to be so dang surprised that this was all going on? Suddenly he's outraged. He might have talked about it a little bit on the campaign trail and them working against us and everything else. But he had many, many opportunities to bring it up during the debates and all sorts of different interviews that he did over the last 6 months. And now he's just seems finally to be outraged because of the WikiLeaks. If I knew that he was trying to get screwed over, then surely he knew it, or he's just a complete idiot. So isn't this kind of fake outrage? If he was going to be this outraged, let's put it this way. If the WikiLeaks doesn't come out, does he do this? Remember, we'd still know that the Democrats some in the Democrat leadership were working against him. So if I knew it, a lot of other people knew it, then surely Bernie knew it. And it's just now that he feels like he has to get, quote unquote, get in the way and block something. So it feels like a little bit of manufactured outrage. And that's why I continue to think that he's doing this just because of his supporters. And in fact, we know that a lot of politicians do that. Just no different going back to the Marco Rubio example. He had to stick in for his people. All those people in Florida he had to continue to run into Florida because all those people who voted for him to put him in the Senate, he can't just abandon those people. Well, he could have. And I get the feeling that maybe Bernie Sanders would love to abandon this thing already, but he has to keep up appearances. Just like Marco Rubio did. And sticking around a little too long. My read on the entire Democrat nomination process is that Bernie Sanders had no shot. And not because it was rigged. If he's really convinced himself that he lost because it's rigged, then he truly, truly is a kook, even more than I think so. Even though I know he won some states. But he has to be thinking, he just lost a nomination to one of the most flawed presidential nominees in history. Not just in recent history, not just on the Democrat side, but one of the most flawed in history. That's how much Bernie Sanders is liked. If Hillary Clinton was as liberal as she is, but didn't have all these other things going on, Bernie Sanders wouldn't have a shot. He might not have gotten a vote. That's how much Bernie Sanders is liked. But like I said, I think in the end, all these people say all these things about Hillary Clinton and her working with Debbie Wasserman Schultz to screw over Bernie Sanders. I think in the end, all of these people are going to come home. I think all of these people who are now pushing Bernie Sanders to go out on that floor, I think eventually all of them are going to vote for Hillary Clinton in November. That's just the way I think, and I just think that because of experience. The truth is that the Democrat Party has been a cluster of opposing views for a long time who just happen to vote the same way. And as we've seen on the Republican side, all this talk about how the Republican Party is changing. Look, we're not going to take it anymore. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, as much as Reince Priebus is going to embrace Donald Trump embraces Reince Priebus. Donald Trump is now part of the establishment, and all of his cultists still think he's on the outside. Yeah, that's how much it's going to change. I think these are just stories. I don't think it's real. I think this is no different than a sporting event where reporters show up and they look to get the angle. They're always looking for some unique story, a little quinky dink or something like this regarding one of the athletes or something. Maybe they were born with a conjoined twin or something like that. And just to make this interesting, where it really has nothing to do with what's going on out on the field. We have the Olympics coming up, and we know how reporters love to do it for that. Because a lot of these people, yes, they do have a lot of diverse backgrounds. And the things the track and field athletes, swimming athletes have to go through because they don't get paid like football players, basketball players, and baseball players, and hockey players, and NASCAR drivers. So they have had a lot of odd jobs and things like that. But what matters is what goes on out in the field. All that other stuff really doesn't mean much. But those sports reporters, they'll try to tell you that it does. Really doesn't. Yeah, it makes it interesting, but it doesn't change the results of the events. And really, that's the only thing anybody cares about. That's the same way with what's going on in politics. All these different writers, no matter their point of view, no matter their political dispositions, they have deadlines. They got to write something. And so they're creating all of this. They're creating, I think, a lot of drama where no drama exists. There's a little bit of drama. Not a lot. The truth is that the establishment, as I predicted November, October last year, the establishment is going to welcome in Donald Trump with open arms. Donald Trump isn't going to try to kick anybody out. He's going to embrace every one of these big money men and women inside the RNC forever. Forever. I predicted his people would go out and vote for whoever the incumbents were. It's all just nothing but a Trump cult. And it's all those Trump people who try to convince us otherwise, and they've all been wrong. Likewise on the Democrat side. Bernie Sanders is going to win. He's going to change politics. Everything else, no, he's just another career politician. He's just another career politician who is going to block Tim Kaine's nomination just because. Just because. And then it won't work, and then he'll go on his merry way, and then he will vote for Hillary Clinton in November. That's the way it's going to go. All these other stories is just to fill up time. 24-hour news cycle. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. They have to create stuff. ESPN. Ruin sports. There is a part of me that believes that as far as national news goes and just reporting what's happening is that we were better off when news was only covered about 2 hours a day. There is a part of me that continues to suspect that. Now, as far as like Red State Talk Radio, this is more opinion stuff. So maybe that's a little bit different. But I just don't want you to get too excited about this and seeing the Democrats fall apart. They're not going anywhere. In addition to you never Trump people seeing that Donald Trump's numbers are bouncing up, and you say, could he really win this? Once again, I would urge you not to get too excited about that either. I'm not sure it means anything. Both of these candidates can't get out of the mid to low 40s. There's still a lot of the game to be played. Neither of them are like that well. I still happen to think, though, in the end that Hillary Clinton's going to win. Let's move on to something else. And in regards to Debbie Wasserman Schultz and what was going on the Democrat side, that, we shouldn't get too crazy about that as being non-Democrats. I'm not part of the Republican Party. I can't say we Republicans because I'm not one anymore. We shouldn't get too excited about that because we had our own shenanigans going on. I would start with what happened with the delegate count during the convention last week, where Iowa's delegates were all given to Donald Trump, despite Ted Cruz winning that state. Donald Trump also got the delegate count in Utah, even though Ted Cruz won that state as well. Shenanigans. Why? Trying to make it look like Donald Trump got a bigger win than he did. And there were all sorts of stories last week about a lot of gently shoving of delegates around, not physically, but mentally, about what they should do and how they shouldn't vote their conscience and that they should just go for the nominee just so we can all look like a unified party. And Trump went along with it every second. I could have sworn that Donald Trump said he was for the little guy. Well, delegates are little guys, aren't they? You Trump people, you're going to be so surprised if he becomes president. Oh my gosh. You are going to be so let down. You're going to be so let down, and frankly, I'm going to enjoy it at least a little bit. So there was the delegate incident from last week that I guess you could say could have been pulled off by Debbie Wasserman Schultz if she were a Republican. We also know how these open primaries, how I think that your average Republican got screwed over by these open primary states where Democrats can switch over and vote for a Republican. And I attached that to the story from last week that this guy Michael Harrington estimates that only 3 million people out of the 15 million votes that Donald Trump got, only 3 million of them were of actual Republicans. How about that? That means 12 million Democrats crossed over and voted for him in all these different states put together. I'd love to know how many Republicans voted for the rest of the people combined. Remember, in the nomination process, Donald Trump only got, 38% of the vote? Of the total of the popular vote on the Republican side? Of that remaining, see if I can do the math, 62%. I wonder how much of that percentage were actually Republicans. I bet it was quite a high percentage. I bet. So there's that, which I think is screwy. Once again, I think Republicans getting conservatives getting screwed over by the Republican Party leadership. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz is not alone in her trying to put a little finger on the scale to try to push things in a certain direction, to mix metaphors. Or is it similes? I'm never sure. So let's, once again, not get too crazy about Debbie Wasserman Schultz and how bad she is. And I saw that Donald Trump put a tweet out there about Debbie Wasserman Schultz and how bad she is. Well, you know what, Donald Trump? You were the victor because of a very similar process. You were a victor because of a Republican Party that long ago decided they wanted to have unity no matter who it was, even if they had to be crooked as well. This is why I continue to say that Donald Trump is a bad guy. He would be a horrible president. And for any of you who vote for him, you are all suckers. You should sit this one out. Now, as far as WikiLeaks goes, and if we are to believe that that's the reason that Debbie Wasserman Schultz finally stepped down, it's the popular story. Maybe she was going to step down anyway. Who knows? Don't think that WikiLeaks doesn't have a lot of Donald Trump emails, too. Don't start thinking that Julian Assange, is that how you say his last name? Assange. Don't think that he just has Democrat emails. And don't think that he's working because he's some pro-Trump person to do this. Now, he may be pro-Bernie Sanders, who the heck knows. But those Russian hackers that have seemed to be everywhere now, I'm sure they've gotten inside the Trump campaign as well. We'll find out. We'll eventually find out. And it may be that in a few months from now, we're looking at Donald Trump's tweets and saying, well, that's pretty mild compared to what he's emailed to people and what his staffers have emailed to people and all of the shenanigans that went on behind the scenes. It's just it's not convenient to do it right now. So for all of you Trump supporters who are enjoying all of this chaos that is going on because of WikiLeaks, you just wait. You're going to get it too. You're going to get it too. Of course, there is the thought out there that Trump will manage to escape all of this because of his ties to Vladimir Putin and Paul Manafort's connection to the Russian mob, and he'll be protected because of all that. Why? I hope that makes all of you Trump people feel that much better. I hope you rest easy knowing that the reason there won't be any leaks coming out about Trump is because he's so connected to the Russian mob. That's irony, isn't it? But they'll save the best for last. WikiLeaks and whoever else, Anonymous, that other group, hacking group, they'll save the best for last. They're not any Donald Trump fans. They're not. When Bernie Sanders goes his way and he finally decides that he's going to back Hillary Clinton, and it's like September, suddenly WikiLeaks and all these other hacking groups will suddenly be so anti-Trump that it might be something along the lines of emails from the Trump campaign being released every day. Because as much as these people might not like Hillary Clinton now because of Bernie Sanders, they surely are going to pick Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. And then we'll see what goes on behind the scenes in the Donald Trump campaign. And it won't be stuff that we have to find out through leaks from the campaign. Or from Corey Lewandowski. Or somebody like that, Michelle Fields. Or that woman who was involved in the campaign and left and said it's just one big show. That happened like 3 or 4 months ago. We'll actually have emails written by people close to Trump. And we'll see. I think one more thing before I go. Ronald Reagan and Gerald Ford. A lot was made last week about Ted Cruz not endorsing Donald Trump. And shortly after that, there were many stories coming about Ronald Reagan and how he endorsed Gerald Ford. He never did. There's an excellent article at conservativereview.com about the true relationship between Ronald Reagan and Gerald Ford in those years 75 into 76, and then the whole way through Ronald Reagan becoming president in 1980. They did not like each other. And in fact, you could say that their relationship was right along the lines of, I think, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. The difference is Gerald Ford never said that Ronald Reagan's parents or father was responsible for the assassination of JFK or anybody else. Of course, maybe in that case, Gerald Ford might have said Ronald Reagan's father was responsible for World War II, or I don't know, or World War I, since Ronald Reagan, kind of have to move it according to the age of the people in the story. But Ronald Reagan, you find out behind the scenes that he was never supposed to give a speech that last night of the convention in 76. It was all off the top of his head. Gerald Ford was hoping that Ronald Reagan would get up there, being that he was unprepared, and make a fool of himself. Of course he didn't. Ronald Reagan ended up giving one of the best speeches of his career. And it was that speech when I think a lot of those delegates started saying, I think we picked the wrong person. He never endorses Gerald Ford for president, never endorsed Gerald Ford for president from the convention the whole way through the election where Gerald Ford lost. Was out in the campaign trail for him, but never talked about Gerald Ford, just talked about conservative principles, which is something I like to remind you on the show, and that's the very reason I'm changing the title of this show, that we have to forget about people and we have to start remembering ideas. And it's the very reason that I think that Ronald Reagan and I would have gotten along fairly well. He was, as nice as he was, you see what I read into him, and I've read a lot about him. Read a couple of the books that have covered him, watched a lot of his speeches, a lot of stuff. I get the idea that Ronald Reagan was not that much of a quote-unquote people person. And I think that 1976 is an example of that. He realized that the correct ideas, the moral ideas, are more important than any one man, no matter what the opposition is. No matter if it's Jimmy Carter or Walter Mondale or anybody else who he ran against, Jerry Brown's father when he won the governorship. Having the right ideas is more important than winning. And it may be that the right ideas don't win today, don't win tomorrow, but it's not worth winning if you don't have the right ideas, if you're willing to compromise and sacrifice your values. That's why Ronald Reagan did not endorse Gerald Ford in 1976. He went out on the campaign trail, never endorsed him. Never said, I ask all of you to vote for Gerald Ford because that's what I'm going to do and I'm going to endorse him. Never said it. He was nice. He was nice. He could have easily not gone down and given that speech, but he did, and you can read that at conservativereview.com. But he did not like Gerald Ford, and Gerald Ford did not like him. Gerald Ford did not like him because Gerald Ford thought that Ronald Reagan was too conservative. Ronald Reagan didn't like Gerald Ford because he thought he gave in too much in the détente with the Soviet Union and everything else. And Ronald Reagan was right. And in the end, it was Ronald Reagan's ideas that won the day, not Gerald Ford's. And by Ronald Reagan never endorsing Gerald Ford, he was able to keep himself separate from Gerald Ford. So when 1980 came around, Ronald Reagan would actually have credibility when it came to what he said about the way the United States should be. The problem is, with what's going on in 2016, is all of these great leaders we thought we had, Scott Brown, Bobby Jindal, all of them have compromised themselves for Donald Trump. And now, being somewhat conservative in one way or another. And now, if they ever want to lead again, they want to ever run for office again, they are tainted by this, which means their likelihood of winning is less. Just because they wanted to win now for a guy who's not conservative, who is a nasty guy. Ronald Reagan didn't do that, stuck to his principles, came back to win in 1980. And that's what I'm trying to convince all of you to keep in mind. But I got to go. I already did all the marketing at the beginning of the show, but I want to remind you, this new show, the new title is now America's Conservative Podcast. You're going to be able to find it only at Podomatic, Stitcher, and iTunes, and EdwardDenzel.com. You can find me on Twitter now, changing the name. It's now USA Podcast, all one word. And what else? My new show, Unfound, coming out late August. It's going to be gone for 2 weeks starting this Wednesday. That's it. It's been a pleasure talking to you. You've been listening to America's Conservative Podcast.